I genuinely like this. For me personally, the best real comparison I can make it to is obviously Mythic Plus, right? My favorite thing in retail is Mythic Plus. That's the thing I find the most rewarding, and I think that's the thing I find the most fun to do in retail. So I like this. Thoughts on the heroic plus in Wrath. Some of you guys may know this, some of you guys may not know this. They are actually introducing a heroic plus version for the dungeons in Wrath, which is very, very interesting. I'm on Wowhead right now, and it says, in an interview with Mr. GM and Scott J, Chris Seihert dropped some massive news regarding how loot will change when Ulduar is released, as well as heroic dungeons gaining an additional challenge mode for better rewards.
Well, what happens to all those items that dropped in 10-player Naxxramas, in 10-player Malygos, in 10-player Sartharian? Those are going to move to drops in the heroic dungeons from an increased difficulty.
Okay.
You'll be able to increase the difficulty of heroic dungeons to get better drops and more badges, more emblems, I should say, off the bosses. It's a change we're making. It's borrowing a little bit from the future game, but we think is going to be really exciting and give all of that content more room to live and grow and be relevant.
That is fantastic. I think that's
so basically they're making like a heroic plus version of a dungeon where you could do it on a more difficult version of the dungeon and get better drops and badges or so on and so forth. Obviously we don't know all the details about how it's gonna work. Is it gonna be like a sort of like a keystone thing where you put it in and it's gonna be a more difficult version? Is there only gonna be one higher level, or is there gonna be multiple layers to the levels of which you can make it more difficult? We don't really know. Regardless though, let's look at the loot changes. When Wrath released in Phase 2 of Wrath Classic, loot that drops in 10-man raids from Phase 1 will be replaced with loot from 25-man from Phase 1. So like whenever Phase 2 releases, instead of having to do 25-man raids to get the good gear from Nax, you can just do 10-man raids and still get the good gear. Because if you don't know, there's a 10-man version of Nax and there's a 25-man version of Nax, right? And the gear difference is actually pretty huge. I personally don't mind this. I think this is a pretty cool thing, because like when you're in Ulduar, and let's say you want to get like a piece from like Kel'Thuzad from 25-man, but your guild doesn't want to do a full raid, you can just go back, do the 10-man, and you can get it done. I think this is pretty cool. Personally, I like this. I might be able to show like an example actually of how different the loot is if I go into Atlas loot here. Kel'Thuzad in 25-man Death Spite. This is like a 200 weapon, right? 203 damage per second, 831 top end damage. And then if I go to 25-man and look at is there a 200 weapon from this as well? Betrayer of Humanity. Look how big the difference between 10-man and 25-man like gear is in Nax. It is absolutely ridiculous how big the difference is, right? So basically, you would be able to, instead of getting Death Spite in Phase 2, this is in Phase 2 whenever Ulduar is out, right? Instead of getting Death Spite from 10-man, you would get Betrayer of Humanity, which is a massive increase in gear, obviously, and it makes it a lot easier for people who has alts, wants to go back and do Nax to get the 25-man gear, to do it faster and do it more efficiently rather than having a 25-man raid, right? So that's how they're gonna do that. And then I assume, what you guys are saying as well, then the 10-man version of the gear would go into Heroic Plus, right? So Death Spite would be from a Heroic Plus reward. We don't really know how that's gonna work, but that could be an assumption of how it would work. Heroic Plus dungeons. When Ulduar releases in Phase 2 of Wrath Classic, all 10-man loot from Phase 1 of Wrath Classic will be moved into Heroic dungeons. Yeah, so that's what you guys said as well. In a new version of the dungeon with an increased difficulty, players will have an ability to increase the difficulty on heroic dungeons, granting them loot from 10-man Phase 1 raids. We are exploring plans to add challenges to heroic dungeons as the expansion proceeds, which also should provide more valuable rewards. Honestly, me personally, I think this is freaking dope, okay? For me, I feel like 5-man dungeons is actually like very, very fun. But the sad reality is that whenever you have full biz gear and like your characters are decked out, there's not really any reasons to really do it. And most of the time, it's a cakewalk, right? You just go into the dungeons and you just one-shot everything. So making it like a little bit of a challenge and making it like so you can actually increase the difficulty in those and have a reward for it too, I think this is cool. I love this. This is really dope. I genuinely like this. For me personally, the best real comparison I can make it to is obviously Mythic Plus, right? My favorite thing in retail is Mythic Plus. That's the thing I find the most rewarding, and I think that's the thing I find the most fun to do in retail. So I like this. I think this is really, really cool. It's just Mythic 0, they're not scaling higher. Well, I feel like this could sort of be like a test, right? For them to really look at it and if they want to do it in a greater capacity, right? Because obviously, if it's just like one more difficulty that's going to be a slightly more harder than the normal heroic version, then, you know, maybe it's not going to be as attractive. But if they make, like, as I said, layers of difficulties where you can scale it up and do like sort of like a, yeah, I mean, Mythic, right? Make it like a Mythic Plus thing where you can do it up, like, let's say, Ashel Narup +1, Ashel Narup +2, Ashel Narup +5, and it will be like a heroic +5. That could be pretty fun! I actually genuinely think that could be fun. I would really, really say so. And if anything, this is like a cool take of like a beginning to what could be Wrath Plus. Who knows?